The wind in Dry Hollow carried two things that summer: dust and secrets. And on the morning a stranger rode into town with a saddle stained dark and a rifle wrapped in oilcloth. The secrets started screaming. Before we go any further, tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Whether you're sitting on a porch in Texas, a quiet apartment in London, or somewhere far past the mountains, drop your city in the comments. Sending love your way, and pull your chair a little closer. You're going to want to hear this one to the very last word. Because the woman waiting on the train platform that day wasn't waiting for trouble. Eliza May Carter had crossed 3 states with a folded letter in her hand and a name stitched inside her glove. She had been promised a farmer, quiet man, a husband, someone who knew how to fix a fence and bow his head before supper. What stepped off that train instead had eyes like winter sky and a gun belt worn smooth from too many draws. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He just looked at her like he already knew how this was going to end. And when she finally found her voice and shouted the words that would echo through Dry Hollow for years to come, "I wanted a husband, not a gunman," the cowboy didn't flinch. He just tipped his hat and said the one sentence that froze her blood. The train hissed like a dying animal as it crawled into Dry Hollow Station, and Eliza May Carter stood very still on the wooden platform, her gloved hands folded in front of her so no one could see them shaking. She was 26 years old. Too old, the women back in Missouri had whispered. Too proud, too plain, too tall, too quick with her tongue. She had heard all the words a woman could hear before the world stopped offering her choices and started offering her leftovers. So when the letter came from a farmer in the Arizona Territory, a man named Samuel Brennan, looking for a wife who could read, cook, and keep a still tongue. She had packed a single trunk, sold her mother's piano, and bought a one-way ticket west. The platform was empty except for her. A yellow dog slept under a bench. Somewhere down the dusty main street, a hammer was striking iron in slow, patient beats, like the heart of a town that had almost forgotten how to live. Dry Hollow looked like a place the sun had bitten and then spit out. The buildings leaned a little. The paint had cracked off the saloon sign so that only the letters S, L, and N still showed. A row of horses stood tied to a rail, their tails swishing at flies, their heads low. The air smelled of horse, of wood smoke, of something else underneath. Something metallic she did not yet have a name for. Eliza turned the letter over in her hand for the 100th time. "I will meet you at the station. You will know me by my gray hat and the bay mare. S. Brennan." She lifted her eyes and scanned the street. No gray hat, no bay mare. Only the wind, and a single tumbleweed dragging itself across the tracks like it had given up on going anywhere in particular. The conductor stepped down behind her, touched his cap. "Ma'am, you sure someone's coming for you?" "I'm sure," she said, though she wasn't. He nodded slowly, the way men nod when they don't believe a woman but don't want to argue with her. "Town's not what it used to be. You be careful." She wanted to ask what he meant. She didn't. She watched him climb back into the train, watched the great iron beast shudder and groan and pull away, dragging its black smoke into the white sky. And then she was alone. The yellow dog opened one eye, looked at her, and closed it again. Eliza picked up her trunk by its leather strap, heavy, biting into her palm even through the glove, and began to drag it toward the only place that looked like it might have answers. The saloon. The one with the broken sign. The one with the row of horses out front. Every one of them lathered, like their riders had come in fast and not yet left. She did not know yet that one of those horses belonged to the man she was about to marry. She did not know yet that he was inside, with a glass of whiskey in front of him and 3 dead men on his conscience from the week before. She pushed open the saloon doors with her shoulder, and the whole room turned to look at her. There were maybe a dozen men inside, hats low, eyes lower. The piano player stopped mid-note. A card fell out of someone's hand and drifted to the floor like a feather. The bartender, an old man with one milky eye, slowly set down the glass he was polishing. Eliza lifted her chin. She had not crossed 3 states to be stared down by strangers. "I am looking," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "for Mr. Samuel Brennan." The silence that followed was so deep she could hear the wind in the rafters. Then a chair scraped back in the far corner, slow and deliberate. A man stood up. He was tall, taller than the others, and he moved the way a wolf moves when it has decided it is not yet hungry. His coat was long and dust-colored. His hat was gray. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet hers, were the cold pale blue of a winter sky just before snow. He walked toward her without hurry. The boards creaked under his boots. The men at the tables did not move. The bartender did not breathe. He stopped 3 feet in front of her, took off his hat, and held it against his chest. "I'm Brennan," he said. His voice was low, quiet, rough as a creek bed in August. "I'm sorry I wasn't at the station, ma'am. There was business." Her eyes dropped, almost without her permission, to his hip. There, polished and well-worn and tied down low against his thigh in the way only one kind of man ties down a holster, was a Colt revolver. The bone grip was stained dark in 2 places. She did not want to think about what had stained it. When she lifted her eyes again, the whole saloon was still watching. And somewhere outside, far off in the hills, a single shot cracked across the afternoon, and Samuel Brennan's jaw tightened almost too fast for her to see. He took her trunk like it weighed nothing, slung it onto the back of a buckboard wagon hitched to the bay mare, and helped her up onto the bench without saying another word. His hand was warm through her glove, calloused. She pulled her fingers back as soon as her boots touched the footboard. The wagon pulled out of Dry Hollow at a slow walk, and Eliza did not look back, because if she looked back she might run back, and if she ran back there was no train coming for 2 more weeks, and she had exactly $4.60 folded into the lining of her bodice. The road bent north out of town, climbed a low rise, and dropped into a long valley the color of old leather. There were no fences, no houses, only mesquite and stone and the long blue shadow of mountains far to the west. She waited until the town was small behind them. Then she said, without looking at him, "You are not a farmer." Samuel Brennan was quiet for so long she thought he hadn't heard. "No, ma'am," he finally said. "I am not. The letter said you were a farmer. The letter said I owned a farm. That part is true." She turned to look at him, then really look at him. In the high desert light his face was harder than it had been in the saloon. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that did not come from smiling. A thin scar ran from his left temple down into his beard. He was perhaps 35, perhaps older. It was difficult to tell with men who had lived the kind of life that left marks. "Then what are you?" she asked. He did not answer for a long while. The mare's hooves rang on stone. A hawk turned slow circles above them, watching for something small to die. "I am a man," he said at last, "who has been a great many things. Most of them I would not write in a letter to a lady. And the gun is one of the things." She looked away. Her throat felt tight. She thought of the piano she had sold. Her mother's piano, with the chip on the middle C key where her brother had dropped a hammer when he was 8 years old. She had sold it to a fat man in St. Louis for $42, and she had cried for an hour afterward in the alley behind his shop. And now she was sitting on a wagon next to a man who carried a gun the way other men carried pocket watches. "Take me back," she said quietly. "Ma'am, take me back to the station. I will wait for the next train. I will pay for my own passage. I have money. There is no train for 14 days. Then I will wait 14 days. He pulled the mare up. The wagon stopped. The hawk above them stopped its circling, as if it too were listening. Samuel Brennan turned on the bench to face her fully. He did not look angry. He did not look sad. He looked, more than anything, tired, the way a man looks when he has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just been told he must carry it a little farther. "Miss Carter," he said, "I will take you back to Dry Hollow if that is what you want. I gave my word in that letter, and I will not hold you to a thing you did not understand when you signed it." She opened her mouth to answer. She meant to say, "Yes, take me back right now." But before she could, his eyes flicked past her shoulder and his whole body changed. It was a small thing, a tightening across the jaw, a drop of the right hand, slow and casual, toward his hip. But she felt it the way an animal feels a change in the weather, deep in the bones. "Don't turn around," he said softly. "What?" "Don't turn around, Miss Carter. Listen to me very carefully. There are 3 riders on the ridge behind us. They have been following since the edge of town. In a moment I am going to slap the mare and we are going to move fast. When I tell you to get down, you get down on the floor of this wagon and you do not lift your head. Do you understand me?" Her heart was beating in her ears. She nodded. "Say it. I understand." He smiled, just a little, for the first time. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had been here before and had walked away when other men had not. "Good," he said. "Hold on, Mrs. Brennan." The whip cracked. The mare leapt forward. And the long quiet of the Arizona afternoon broke open like a dropped glass, because from the ridge behind them, 3 rifles answered at once. The first bullet split the wood of the bench between them. Eliza did not remember screaming. She remembered only the sudden weight of Samuel's hand on the back of her neck, pushing her down, hard, onto the floorboards of the wagon. She remembered the smell of pine and oil and old hay. She remembered the way the world narrowed to the sound of hooves and the high, ugly whistle of lead through air. He was driving the mare standing up now, the reins in his left hand, the colt in his right. He fired once over his shoulder without looking. Then again. The second shot was answered by a cry from the ridge, short, surprised, cut off. One of the riders, she thought wildly. He had hit one of them without even turning his head. She had never in her life been in the presence of a man who could do such a thing. She did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. The wagon hit a rut and nearly threw her. Her teeth cracked together. She tasted blood. The mare was running flat out now, her hooves throwing up clods of red earth, her flanks already streaked with foam. Samuel guided her with the lightest pressure of the reins. The way a man guides a woman in a dance he has danced 1,000 times before. "Hold on," he said again, calmer than any man had a right to be. The road dropped sharply into a creek bed. The wagon bounced once, twice, came down hard, and the back wheel screamed against something it should not have struck. Eliza heard it crack. She heard Samuel curse, quietly, the kind of curse a man uses when he is doing arithmetic in his head and the numbers are coming up short. "How far?" she shouted up at him over the noise. "Half a mile." "To where?" "Home." The word landed strangely between them. She did not have time to think about it. The wagon climbed out of the creek bed, jolted onto level ground, and then she saw it. A low stone house tucked into the shoulder of a hill, with a small barn behind it and a windmill turning slow against the sky. There were no curtains in the windows. There was no smoke from the chimney. It did not look like a home. It looked like a place a man went to be left alone. Samuel hauled the mare to a stop in front of the door, jumped down before the wheels had fully stilled, and lifted Eliza off the bench by her waist as if she weighed no more than a child. He set her on her feet and pushed her toward the door. "Inside. Bar the door. Stay away from the windows." "What about you?" His eyes flicked toward the rise behind them. She could hear hooves now, distant but coming. "I will be along directly," he said. She did not move. "Mr. Brennan." "Go, Eliza." It was the first time he had used her given name. She did not know why it made her chest tighten. She did not know why she obeyed. She ran inside. The house was dim and cool and smelled of cedar. A single room with a stone hearth, a narrow bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs and shelves lined with books. More books than she would have expected, and not the kind a farmer reads. Plutarch, Marcus Aurelius, a worn Bible, a book of poems in a language she could not name. She did not have time to wonder about any of it. She slammed the heavy oak door, dropped the iron bar across it, and pressed her back against the wood. Outside, 3 shots rang out in quick succession. Then a 4th. Then silence, the kind of silence that is somehow worse than the shooting. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not unfold them. She closed her eyes. She prayed. She had not prayed since her mother's funeral, but she prayed now, in whole sentences, the way her mother had taught her. A long minute passed, then another, and then footsteps, slow, even. One man walking, not running. They came up to the door and stopped. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. "It's me," Samuel said quietly through the wood. She lifted the bar with both hands. The door swung open. He stood there in the late afternoon light, his hat gone, his hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. A thin red line cut across his cheek where a bullet had passed close enough to kiss him. He was holding his left arm against his side. "Are they dead?" she heard herself ask. He looked at her for a long moment, and in his pale blue eyes she saw something she had not expected to see. Not pride, not satisfaction, something closer to grief. "2 of them," he said. "The 3rd one ran." He stepped past her into the house, and as he passed she saw the dark stain spreading slowly down his sleeve, and she understood that the man she had been about to call a gunman was bleeding into his own floor, and that the 3rd rider, the one who had run, would be back and would not be alone. She had not been raised to nurse a wounded man, but she had been raised by a mother who had buried 3 children before she buried her husband, and somewhere in her hands there was a memory of how to do hard things quietly. She set water on the fire. She tore strips from a clean cotton shirt she found folded in a chest at the foot of the bed. She helped Samuel out of his coat and then his shirt, and when she saw the wound, a clean furrow across the outside of his upper arm, deep but not into the bone, she let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "It is not as bad as it looks," she said. "I know. Sit still." "I am sitting still." "Sit stiller." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Not quite. She cleaned the wound with hot water and a little of the whiskey from the bottle on the table. He did not make a sound, though she felt the muscle of his arm jump once under her fingers. She bound the arm tight. She tied off the cloth. She washed the blood from her hands in the basin by the door and watched the water turn pink. Then red. Then pink again. When she turned back, he was watching her. "You did that well," he said. "My mother was a midwife in a town with no doctor." "Ah!" She sat down across from him at the small table. Outside, the sun was lowering. The shadows in the room had grown long. The windmill creaked in a wind that had picked up with the evening. "Mr. Brennan," she said. "Samuel. Samuel. I am going to ask you a question, and I would like the truth." He inclined his head. "Who were those men?" He was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his hands. Large hands, scarred across the knuckles, the right one slightly stained at the base of the thumb where, she suspected, no amount of washing had ever quite removed the powder. "5 years ago," he said finally, "I rode with a man named Cyrus Hale. You will not have heard the name. He kept his work west of the Mississippi and east of the territories, in the gap between what the law could see and what it could not. He paid well. He paid in gold. And he did not ask his men where they had come from before they came to him, which suited me, because where I had come from was a place I did not wish to discuss." She did not interrupt. "For 3 years I did things I will not describe to you. I will not describe them because you do not deserve to carry them, and because saying them out loud does not make a man lighter. It makes him heavier. Do you understand?" "Yes." "In the 4th year, Cyrus took a job that I would not take. There was a family, a father, a mother, 2 daughters. The youngest was perhaps 9. Cyrus wanted them gone, because the father had spoken to a marshal about him. I would not do it. I told him so. He laughed. He said a man does not leave his crew, he is left by it. That night I rode out of his camp with a saddlebag of his gold and a price on my head, and I rode until the horse died under me, and then I walked, and then I bought this land with what was left, and I built this house with my own hands, and I have lived here for 14 months, and I have not pulled a gun on a living thing in all that time. Until today." She let the words settle. "And the family?" she asked quietly. "The one Cyrus wanted gone." A muscle moved in his jaw. "I sent word to the marshal before I left. They lived. The father, the mother, both daughters. They lived because I told. And Cyrus has known ever since that I told. So the men today were his." She nodded slowly. She rose and walked to the shelf of books. She ran one finger along the spines. Marcus Aurelius, Plutarch. The poems in the strange language she now suspected was Greek. "And the wife," she said, not turning around. "Why did you send for a wife?" He did not answer immediately. "Because," he said at last, "a man living alone in a stone house at the end of a road, with books and a gun and no woman and no child, is a man who has given up on becoming anything else. And I did not wish to give up. Not yet." She closed her eyes. It was, she thought, the most honest thing a man had ever said to her. She was about to speak, about to say something. She did not know what, when her eyes drifted up the wall above the shelf. There, tucked between two books, was a folded paper, yellowed at the edges. The kind of paper a man does not throw away. She reached up. She drew it out. It was a wanted poster. The face on it was younger, beardless, the eyes a little less tired. But it was unmistakably him. And above the face, in heavy black print, was a name she had never heard him say. Wanted, dead or alive. $1,500 reward. Samuel Preacher Brennan. For the murders of Sheriff John Deacon and Deputy Eli Ward. Abilene, Kansas, 1873. The paper trembled in her hand. Behind her, very quietly, Samuel Brennan said, "I was going to tell you. I just had not yet found the hour." She did not turn around for a long moment. She stood with her back to him and the paper in her hand, and she made herself breathe, in, out, the way her mother had taught her to breathe in rooms where bad news had just been delivered. When she finally turned, her face was very calm. She had learned, somewhere along the way, how to make her face calm. It was a skill a woman had to learn early or not at all. "Tell me now," she said. Samuel did not look away from her. To his credit, he did not look away. "The sheriff and his deputy in Abilene," he said, "were not lawmen. Not the way that word ought to mean. They were on Cyrus Hale's payroll. They had been for 2 years. They were the reason a freight wagon went missing in the spring of '72 with 4 men inside it. And the reason the widow of one of those men was found in the river that fall. I did not know all of this when I rode into Abilene. I learned it slowly, the way a man learns a thing he does not want to know." He shifted in his chair. The bandage on his arm had begun to darken again at the edge. She noticed but did not interrupt. "There was a girl," he said, 15 years old, worked at the boarding house where I was staying. One night she came to my door crying because the deputy had cornered her in the kitchen and torn her dress. She had nowhere to go. She had no people. I gave her my room and I slept in the stable. In the morning I went to find the sheriff. I meant only to speak with him, to tell him what his deputy had done, to ask him to act. And he laughed at me. He told me the girl was lying. He told me to leave town by sundown or be arrested for disturbing the peace. And as I turned to go, his deputy came in behind me with a shotgun cocked. Eliza's hand tightened on the back of the chair. "I was faster," Samuel said simply. "I was faster than both of them. I did not plan to be. I did not want to be. But I was." "And the poster?" The poster was printed 2 days later by the man who owned the town's newspaper and 3/4 of its land. A man who had been at supper with the sheriff every Sunday for 9 years. He printed the poster, he posted the reward, and he made sure my name was known in every territory between the Missouri and the Pacific. And so I rode. I rode for 2 years before I went to Cyrus. I rode because there was nowhere else to go and no one to believe me, and a man without a name in this country is a man already dead. Eliza looked down at the paper in her hand. Preacher. That was what they had called him. "Why preacher?" she asked. He almost smiled. "Because I used to read the Bible in camp. Out loud. The other men thought it was funny. The name stuck." She set the poster down on the table. She did not crumple it. She did not throw it in the fire. She set it down the way a woman sets down a thing she has not yet decided what to do with. "Samuel," she said. "Yes. Are you a good man?" He was quiet a very long time. Outside, the windmill creaked. A coyote called once, far away, and was answered by another. "No," he said. "I am not a good man. I have killed 7 men in my life. 4 of them deserved it. 2 of them perhaps deserved it. The seventh was a boy of 19 who rode with Cyrus and who pointed a gun at me first, and I have thought about him every night since, and I do not know whether he deserved it or not, because I never asked him his name. She drew in a slow breath. But I am trying, he said, to be a better man than I was. I do not know whether I will succeed. I do not know whether a man can ever fully wash off the things he has done. But I am trying. And when I sent that letter east, I did not send it to deceive you. I sent it because I thought, perhaps foolishly, that if a woman of honest character came to share this house with me, I might one day learn how to be the kind of man she would not be ashamed to sit beside in church. The room was very quiet. Eliza walked to the door. She opened it. The evening light came in long and gold across the floor. The dust in the air moved slowly, the way dust moves in a place where nothing is in a hurry. She stood in the doorway with her back to him, and she looked out at the land, at the low hills turning purple in the dusk, at the mountains far to the west, at the long road that led back to Dry Hollow and the train that would come in 14 days. She thought of her mother's piano. She thought of the chip on the middle C key. She thought of the fat man in St. Louis who had counted out $42 onto his counter without ever once looking at her face. She thought of the way Samuel Brennan had said her name, Eliza, just once, in the moment when he might have died. She closed the door. She turned. She walked back to the table. I am going to stay, she said. For now. Something in his face moved that she did not have a word for. I am not staying because I forgive you, she said. I do not yet know whether I forgive you. I am staying because the third rider is coming back, and because I do not believe a wounded man should face him alone, and because my mother did not raise a woman who runs. She paused. She looked him very steadily in the eye. But Samuel Brennan, if you lie to me one more time, about anything large or small, I will walk out of this house and across that desert in my city shoes, and I will not look back. Do you understand me? I understand. Good. Now eat something. You have lost more blood than you think. And as she turned to the fire to set a pan on the coals, neither of them heard, at first, the soft sound of a single rider easing his horse to a stop just beyond the ridge above the house. A rider who had been watching the windows for nearly an hour now, counting the lamps, counting the shadows and smiling. They did not light a second lamp. Samuel had taught her, in a low voice over their plates of beans and salt pork, the small grammar of a house under watch. Move along the inside walls, not across the middle of the room. Keep the lamp low and behind you so your shadow does not show in the window. Listen for the dogs in the canyon. There were no dogs of his, but there were wild ones, and they barked at strangers before strangers ever heard a hoof. Eliza listened. She listened the way she had listened in church as a girl, with her whole body, as if the words might one day save her life. By full dark the wind had risen. It moved across the stone house and the dry grass and made the windmill complain like an old woman in a rocking chair. The moon was a thin curve, pale and unhelpful, and the stars above Wolf Creek were so many and so cold that they did not look like points of light at all but like small holes punched through a dark cloth, with something brighter behind it. Samuel sat with his back to the inside wall, the Colt across his thigh, a Winchester rifle leaning at his good shoulder. His face in the low lamplight looked carved. He had not spoken in a quarter of an hour. How will we know when he comes? Eliza whispered. We will know. How? The mare in the barn. She does not like strangers. She will tell us. As if she had been waiting for her cue, somewhere out in the dark behind the house, the bay mare let out a long, low whicker, not loud but not idle. The kind of sound a horse makes when it has caught a smell it does not like. Samuel's eyes did not move, but everything else about him changed. Eliza, he said softly, get down behind the hearth. The stone is 2 feet thick. Stay there until I tell you to move. Whatever you hear, whatever I say, stay there. She did not argue. She crossed the room low and quick and slid down behind the hearth, her back against warm stone, her knees pulled up to her chin. From there she could see only a slice of the room. The table, the corner of the door, the lamp burning small and yellow on the floor where Samuel had set it down to throw his shadow the wrong way. The wind dropped suddenly, the way wind does when something larger than wind is moving through a place. The silence rang. A single board outside the door creaked. Samuel did not move. He did not call out. He did not lift the rifle. He simply waited, the way a man waits who has waited like this before and is no longer in any hurry to be the first to speak. The door handle turned. Slowly, so slowly that Eliza could hear the iron pin inside it, click by patient click. The door was barred. The handle turned the whole way and stopped. There was a long, considering pause. And then a voice came through the woods, soft, almost friendly. The voice of a man who had been smiling for so long he had forgotten how not to. "Preacher," the voice said. "It's been a while." Samuel closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, they were the eyes of a stranger. "Cyrus," he said. Eliza's heart stopped, then started again very fast. Cyrus Hale. The name Samuel had spoken only once that afternoon and had not spoken since. Cyrus Hale, who had ridden with him for 3 years. Cyrus Hale, who had wanted a family of 4 dead in their beds. "You killed 2 of my boys this afternoon, preacher," Cyrus said through the door. His voice was still soft, almost kind. "That was unfriendly. They shot first. They always shoot first. That's what I pay them for." A small laugh. "I have come a long way to see you, Samuel. I am tired. I would like to come inside." "You may not. I thought you might say that." There was a pause. And then Eliza heard it before she understood it, the small wet sound of a match being struck. "I will give you a moment," Cyrus said, "to think about how this ends. Your roof, preacher, is cedar. Your walls are stone, but stone burns from the inside when the timbers fall. I have 4 men with me. We have brought oil. We are not in a hurry." Samuel did not answer. "Come out," Cyrus said gently, "and I will let the woman live. I will put her on a horse and send her back to Dry Hollow without a hair touched. You have my word." Eliza found that she had stopped breathing. Samuel turned his head, just a fraction, toward the hearth. His pale eyes found hers in the gap between the stones. He looked at her for perhaps 2 seconds. He did not look afraid. He looked, more than anything, sorry. Sorry the way a man is sorry for a thing he has known all along he would one day have to do. "Eliza," he said quietly. "Don't," she whispered. "Eliza, listen to me. There is a loose stone behind your back. The 3rd one up. Push it. There is a passage. Comes out in the creek bed behind the barn. Follow the creek east. There is a man named Marshall Tomlin in Red Fork. 2 days' ride. Tell him preacher sent you. Tell him Cyrus Hale is here. He will come. Samuel, go now. I will not leave you. You will. I will not." His voice did not rise, but something in it bent. A small, terrible bending, like a thing that had held its shape for many years finally giving way. "Eliza May Carter," he said, "you crossed 3 states to find a husband. You will not lose him in the first night. Now do as I say." She felt the tears come. She did not let them fall. She reached behind her, fingers shaking, and found the 3rd stone from the bottom. It moved. It moved under her hand like something that had been waiting. Outside, Cyrus Hale's voice came again, gentler still. "I am lighting the match now, preacher." Samuel rose to his full height. He set down the Winchester. He kept only the Colt, the bone-gripped Colt with the dark stains. He walked to the center of the room. He stood in the lamplight as if he wanted to be seen. "Cyrus," he called. "Yes, preacher." "Open the door yourself. I am coming out." Eliza pushed the stone aside. Cold air rushed in from the dark passage behind it. She turned one last time and looked at the man she had agreed, only that afternoon, to marry. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the door. And he was smiling, the small, terrible smile of a man who has finally, after a very long time, decided exactly who he is. She slipped into the dark. Behind her, the door burst open, and the night came alive with fire. She rode into Red Fork on a stolen horse 2 days later, her dress torn at the hem, her hands raw from creek stones, her face streaked with soot that would not come off no matter how she washed. Marshall Tomlin was a gray-bearded man with quiet eyes, and when she said the word preacher his coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down. He did not ask her to repeat herself. He stood up, called for his deputies, and within the hour 11 men were riding hard for Wolf Creek. What they found there is still spoken of in the high desert, in low voices by men who were not yet born when it happened. They found the stone house standing, scorched along the eaves, the door blown off its hinges, the windows black with smoke, but standing. They found 4 men dead in the yard, each one shot clean, each one with a hand still on a holster he had not been quite fast enough to draw. They found Cyrus Hale at the threshold of the door, on his back, his eyes open to the morning sky, a single neat hole between them. And inside the house, slumped against the cold stones of the hearth where Eliza had hidden the night before, they found Samuel Brennan. He was still breathing, barely. There were 3 wounds in him, any one of which should have finished a smaller man. The Colt was empty in his hand. Beside him on the floor was a folded letter, addressed in careful schoolhouse handwriting to a Miss Eliza May Carter of Missouri. He had written it weeks before she ever stepped off the train. He had never sent it. It said only 7 words. I do not deserve you. Come anyway. She read it once, sitting on the floor beside him while the marshal's men worked. She folded it. She put it inside her glove, where the letter that had brought her west had once been. And she took Samuel Brennan's good hand in both of hers, and she did not let go, not when they lifted him, not when they laid him in the wagon, not for the long slow ride back to Red Fork under a sky the color of his eyes. He lived. Took the better part of a year. He lived because the marshal's wife was a stubborn woman with steady hands, and because Eliza May Carter, who had been raised by a midwife, did not know the meaning of the word quit. They were married in the spring, in a small white church on a hill above Red Fork, in front of 7 witnesses and a preacher who had never heard of any other preacher and never asked. Samuel wore no gun that day. He has not worn one since. If you ride out past Wolf Creek now, the locals will point you to a stone house with a windmill behind it, and a porch where, on most evenings, a tall, quiet man sits with a book on his knee and a woman beside him in a rocking chair, and the long blue shadow of the mountains comes down slowly across them both. She had wanted a husband, not a gunman. In the end, she got a man who had been both, and who had laid one of them down, forever, the night the stars went out over Wolf Creek. What would you have done in her place? Would you have stayed on that wagon? Or would you have run? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, even just a little, leave a like, subscribe, and stay close. The next ride out into the dust is already saddled, and it begins with a single grave, and a name no one in town will say out loud. Until then, ride safe.